All right, so continuing on with my 2024 college football way too early schedule preview. Today we're looking at Miami, Texas, and Oklahoma. Of course, Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, the schedule getting a lot harder, but we will begin with Miami. Now, Miami just recently got Cam Ward. Don't really know what happened with him. I guess he was declaring for the draft, but now he's going to Miami, probably with some decent NIL package, and he will very likely be their starting quarterback in 2024. So they will begin week one on the road at Florida, and that is in Gainesville. So that'll be an interesting battle there between two Florida schools, Miami of Florida, traveling to Florida. Nice little rivalry there, SEC versus ACC. And then you do have Florida A&M in week 2. That's an FCS team. That'll be a free win. Ball State in week 3, another free win for Miami after a semi-tough week 1 at Florida. But I do think that's a winnable game for Miami. Week 4, they're on the road at South Florida. But South Florida really doesn't have their own stadium. That's going to be at Raymond James Stadium. It's where Alabama faced South Florida. So you would think that could be another easy win for the Hurricanes. Then because the ACC doesn't have the official dates, all of these games are to be determined. Their first 4 weeks, you can see, those are just the non-conference games. So they will have road games at California, at Georgia Tech, at Louisville, all winnable, very winnable games. They will host Duke, FSU. FSU is going to be tough, but at least you get them at home. Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, and then they're at Syracuse. This is an unbelievably manageable schedule for Mario Cristobal. You've got the 12-team playoff. You can lose a game and still make it in. In the ACC, how many teams will actually make it into the 12-team playoff? I would say maybe at the most 2, just because the ACC is not a very good conference. And, of course, the Big Ten and the SEC are going to be hogging many of the spots. But just looking at this, if you can get past Florida on the road in week 1 with Cam Ward, who has a lot of experience, you're looking at a free 4-0 start. Maybe outside of that South Florida game because it is on the road, but I would say certainly Miami's going to have significantly more talent with their NIL. They've got a very talented roster, but yeah, I mean, those road games at California, hilarious. Yeah, that's a conference game in the ACC. Miami at California. But Georgia Tech, Louisville, I'm expecting a step back from Louisville. So Miami, very manageable schedule in the ACC. They might be able to take advantage of that. And with the veteran leadership of Cam Ward, possibly make a 12-team playoff as a lower seed, depending on what happens with FSU. But again, they get FSU at home. They don't face Clemson at all in the regular season. We will see. Let's move on to Texas. So Texas returning Quinn Ewers. They are undoubtedly going to be a top 5 preseason team with what they return. They've gotten 4 really solid players from the transfer portal, really good quality. And you can see, if you want to see their spring game, it is on 420, the orange and white spring game. I'm not even sure why that's listed, but then they start with Colorado State at home. So they'll start off 1-0 on the road at Michigan. But we just saw J.J. McCarthy announce for the NFL draft, Jim Harbaugh taking interviews, possibly leaving. Very winnable road game for Texas if Michigan is replacing both their head coach and their starting quarterback next year. Of course, it's going to be tough in the big house, but still, you could win that one if you are the Longhorns, taking advantage of a first-year coach and a new quarterback, although maybe Michigan goes crazy in the portal and tries to attract a quarterback from another school. We will see. You do have UTSA, who's always decent, but I think UTSA's quarterback, who was there for like 5 years, is now officially graduating, so UTSA might take a step back next year. That should be a win for them. They get Louisiana Monroe at home. That'll be another free win for them. And then they get Mississippi State at home, so there it is with the SEC schedule kicking off. That's another very winnable game to start SEC play. They get their first bye week. And then they get Oklahoma in the rivalry game, the neutral site noon game on the 12th of October. Georgia, but they get them at home. Guessing that's going to be a night game, probably the 7 o'clock game on ESPN, maybe an ABC game, we'll see. At Vanderbilt, pretty much a free win there. Then another off week, so they've got a bye and then 3 games and then another bye. You get Florida at home, another winnable game. At Arkansas, very winnable. Versus Kentucky, and then at A&M. I'll be honest, that is you know what? Georgia's tough, but you get them at home. You dodge Alabama. This is a manageable schedule. I mean, look at these games. Florida at home, at Vanderbilt, at Arkansas, Kentucky at home, A&M on the road. That's kind of annoying, and that's going to be the whole, rivalry. Texas at Texas A&M. It's going to be a raucous environment, I'm sure, but it is the last game of the season. Maybe at that point, Texas A&M already with 4 or 5 losses, the crowd won't show up nearly as much, but I would imagine it would be a sellout. That's going to be a huge game because it is 2 in-state schools. But I would say if Texas can get past Michigan, you don't want to say it's home sailing because they're probably going to lose to Georgia. The Oklahoma game could be tough. Oklahoma, we'll see what ends up happening with them next year. But either way, it is a manageable schedule for Texas. And then moving on to Oklahoma, you can see they've got their spring game listed as well, but then they start with Temple. That'll be a free win. You've got Houston at home, another game that they should win relatively easily. Tulane at home. Tulane's a decent program, but that's 3 straight home games. You think that's another win? And they get Tennessee at home starting SEC play in week 4. That'll be a zesty little matchup. 2 young quarterbacks, Nico Laman-Leva, Jackson Arnold battling it out. And that would be an Oklahoma team going into that game ranked at 3-0 because you would expect 3 straight home wins, and then they've got another home game. If you are Oklahoma, it is mandatory. Joining the SEC with 4 straight home games, you've got to start 4-0. You've got to get a big win against a potentially ranked Tennessee team, but Tennessee starting a first-year quarterback there. And then you do have a game at Auburn, very winnable. You get your first bye week. You've got Texas in a neutral site game. Oklahoma very realistically could go into that game undefeated. South Carolina at home, another very winnable game. At Ole Miss is going to be tough, but I think Oklahoma, it's not like Ole Miss is a world beater. Ole Miss returned a lot. I get it. They've got a good roster. They're probably going to be favorites in that game, but it's a potential maybe 30-35% chance for Oklahoma to go on the road and win that game. They get Maine at home. The FCS team, wow. That's got to be one of the most random matchups I think I've ever seen. November 2nd against Maine. Maine at Oklahoma, wow. And then at Missouri. Missouri could be good next year. Missouri kind of has that feel of like the underrated team that everyone starts to overrate, and then next year they're going to lose 4 games in a tougher SEC. But who knows? I mean, that's going to be a tough game on the road at Missouri. But the other thing with Missouri is they're getting propped up. They beat an Ohio State team that was starting, 3rd-string quarterback. There were a lot of issues there, but Missouri did have a very good year. And then they get their second bye week really late into the season. And then they get the tough games. They get Alabama at home. Theoretically, you could win that game if you're Oklahoma. Alabama, Nick Saban retiring. They're losing some players to the portal. We'll see. But Jalen Milroe coming back, you would expect. And then at LSU is going to be another very tough game. So the end of the season is very hard. You look at the schedule and you can say Texas, at Ole Miss, Alabama, and at LSU. It's very important for Oklahoma that they don't slip up early. They really need to start 5-0, going into that bye week clean, and then you do have Texas. You get a full extra week to prepare for Texas and that rivalry game, but it's very clear looking at these 3 schedules, Miami does have a big opportunity with how bad the ACC is, getting Cam Ward. We'll have to see what they end up doing, but they get Florida State at home, and they don't even face Clemson, and they've got a relatively easy non-conference if they can get by Florida on the road in week 1. And we know how much of a crapshoot week 1 is. These are just college kids. Week 1, normally the games are very choppy, but either way, Miami, based off of their schedule, has a serious chance. As for Texas, I mean, they're going to be a good team. I think they've got a big chance early in the season to make a statement at Michigan. We'll see if they can do it. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.